Hello, everybody. We'll be starting in just a minute, and we'll just let people kind of funnel in and get situated here. If you want to let us know where you're watching from, you can send that over in the chat. You can also just know any questions that pop up, you can send that in the chat as well. Or there should be a Q&A feature at the bottom bar of the Zoom window, so feel free to submit questions there. But we'd love to hear where you guys are tuning in from. And we're really glad to have you here. And so we'll be getting started in just about 30 seconds. So hang tight. All right. So welcome everybody to the webinar today, Getting Beyond Expert Guesses, Assessing Book Concept, Interest, and Proposal Potential. My name is Erin. I'm going to be kind of hosting and keeping the webinar going along today. So we are going to be exploring acquisitions. Acquisitions has been at the core of publishing success since the industry was invented. Yet even in today's data-driven environment, it remains one of the most intuition-driven, subjective business decisions. So joining us today for this webinar, Jeff James, CEO of Target Audience Insights, Mark Weinstein, Editorial Director and Senior Vice President of Kevin Anderson and Associates. They are going to be diving in, really exploring data and acquisitions, what publishers and authors can be doing with data to just make a better publishing business. So I am going to turn it over to Jeff James to really kick off the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone coming this afternoon. It's a gorgeous day on the East Coast. I hope it is wherever you are joining from. But again, my name is Jeff James. I run a company called Target Audience Insights, and we're basically a new company that's dedicated to the publishing industry. And we focus on helping publishers, all types of content creators and curators make better decisions along the whole publishing journey. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What I'm really excited about is talking to Mark Weinstein. He's the Senior Vice President and editor at Kevin Anderson and Associates, which is just a phenomenal editing and ghostwriting, business, if you will. Probably the leading one out there because they just do some phenomenal projects. We've worked with them quite a bit. And Mark, you have quite an amazing background as an acquisition editor and being in the publishing industry for quite some time. So I thought it'd be cool. Just give us a little overview of your acquisition journey. I mean, you've racked up quite several hundred books in terms of the acquisitions, and some of them are right up my alley. So go ahead and share a little bit of your background.
Sure. Well, I joined Kevin Anderson and Associates early in 2020 after 20 years as an acquiring editor for a variety of New York-based book publishers. My area of expertise and specialty has always been sports and fitness. I've also worked a little bit in health, self-help, history, biography, reference, even some children's. I've done cookbooks. I've basically worked on every kind of book except fiction. It's been a long journey, 400 plus books, lots of bestsellers. And that brings me to Kevin Anderson, where, I lead the editorial team. We have what I like to call a murderer's row of editorial talent here. And it's a pleasure to lead that team.
Very good. Well, our topic today is near and dear to my heart because when I joined the publishing industry, I'll just say a little shocked about just how subjective and sort of intuitive the most important decision in publishing, which is which books to publish, was really made. I came from some consumer marketing background, industries, and we tested everything. But in publishing, it was a little different. So would you just sort of walk through what your experience was as an acquisition editor? I know you've been in big publishers, small publishers, and just talk about what you see in common as what the sort of current industry standard process is, and maybe where some of the flaws might be.
Sure. I mean, the difference in acquisitions processes from a small publisher to a big publisher, it varies a lot. At a small publisher where you don't have a lot of financial resources, you kind of have to make a lot of your own books. So the editorial team will, scout and identify trends and then try to publish into those trends whenever possible. We would have editorial meetings where, somebody around the table would say, I read this interesting article in such and such magazine. We should reach out to that writer and see if he has any book ideas. Or we'd see something that seemed like it was going to be, in the kind of, in the cultural moment, and we would try to publish as soon as we could into a niche like that. At the bigger publishers, the agents are everything. And these agents will come with proposals and they will pitch. And then these publishers will spend lots of money on people who they believe can deliver an audience to their book. And what we've seen over time is that platform has become king, because without a whole lot of information, kind of information that your firm provides, those decisions are based on how many Instagram followers an author has, or how many Twitter followers, or how many copies their previous book sold. So what we have is access to a system called BookScan, which used to be part of Nielsen, is now owned by another entity. But that's a way to keep agents and authors honest, right? So an agent used to call and say, hey, my client's last book sold 500,000 copies. And we would have no way of, checking that. Since 2001, we have now had the ability to check pretty much the sales of any book. Now, BookScan is not a perfect resource. It does leave out special sales. It leaves out certain retailers that don't report to them, but it accounts for roughly 75 to 80% of the book publishing marketplace. So we have a chance to take a look at that. We have a chance to take a look at the author's sales history and the sales histories of books that would be considered competitive titles or comparative titles, and to make a decision based on that. And that's really it. That's it. You have sales data and you got platform data, and then you kind of have to go with a hunch. And one of the reasons why publishing is so, tradition bound is that there's a reason why we've always done it that way. And it's because the people who make these decisions are used to doing it that way. And it's an industry that is resistant to change to a degree. It took a while for people to even embrace BookScan. So we really do rely on the intuition of the decision makers and the editors in the room. But obviously, the more information that we can gather to put towards a decision, the more informed that decision might be. And, my understanding is that, Target Audience Insights can turn around, a report in 3 days. Sometimes we have to make pressurized decisions on acquisitions where, a book will go to auction, an agent will drop a proposal in your lap on a Monday and say, we're going to auction on Thursday, and just to get the profit and loss statement generated by your finance department could take 3 days. So the ability to get information quickly is a real feather in the cap for anyone looking to make a difficult acquisitions decision.
Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced as a publisher. I was, you're sort of taken aback by the conditions by which you're asked to make these, decisions, the speed of them, and then the lack of, some of the insight. I think the BookScan thing that you mentioned that was a real game changer when that became available. But that's also about looking backwards. Mm-hmm. I know that we made a lot of mistakes in acquisitions looking at a giant book in BookScan, and then the second one, didn't quite live up to, to its billing. So what do you think the game-changing dynamics would be if some more forward-looking data points could be fed into an acquisition editor's decision process? What do you, first of all, what type of data points would be interesting, and how do you think that would change perhaps the prioritization of what to acquire?
Well, look, a smarter man than me once said that people think publishing is a business, but it's more like a casino, and the truth is, there are a lot of experts out there, people like me who've been doing this 20 years or more, who still, we swing and a miss sometimes. We're not, our hit rate is not high. And something like 80% of books never earn out their advance, which is an insane amount when you consider how much money is on the line, right? So having actual consumer data would be really, really useful, because we just don't have that. We have the comparative sales and we have the platform, but we don't know how the public is going to react to a certain book concept or a certain author. There are certain authors whose platforms just don't transfer. They may be huge on, TikTok, but that might not actually translate to book sales. So it's great to kind of have additional information to help guide those decisions.
The one sort of key inhibitor in many ways is that speed, the speed of having to make a certain decision. Do you think that there is room in the process if it's initiated at the right point in the decision making, when you get a proposal, when you start hearing about a concept? Do you think that there could be opportunity to get that into those ed board discussions and really factor that in?
I mean, yeah, not every book is going to be a hot potato, right? Not every book is going to be one of these Monday to Thursday, rush jobs. A lot of times you're going to have a week or two to make a decision. And other times you're building the idea yourself. So you have all the time in the world to factor in that kind of data. It's frankly, it's rare that the books rush to market or rush to a decision, but that does happen. But the idea that you can have a report in 3 days, is amazing, because when you are pressed for time, any additional information is, extremely valuable.
Okay, good. Well, I know folks probably have some great questions, so I'm going to pull the slides back up here just for a minute. Walk through what the process looks like for a target reader insight score, interest score, and then we'll save plenty of time for questions. Does that sound all right?
Great.
Around a little bit. Okay, great. Excuse me. Okay, so as Mark was mentioning, when I joined publishing, I heard this statement a lot, because I would wander around to my editors and talk about, gosh, our failure rate, it seems pretty high. And the response I would get is, well, yeah, that's publishing. What you can sort of get out there to market. The market is the final decider. And I was just starting to think, how could we get some of that feedback prior to all the expense and time of publishing a book? And so, obviously I learned in my career that there are many dials that need to be set right before a book succeeds. Like, there's certainly the interest in the topic or theme. Did we pay the right amount of money for it? The definition of success is often based on, well, how much did you pay for it? So
Right.
If you paid small and you sell a few and you get your money back, success. Pay way too much, obviously it's going to be harder to be a success. But there's so many other things, title, cover design, how we're describing the book in our marketing data copy. Is there a sort of inherent word of mouth that can be generated? And then the one that Mark, you mentioned, is author and platform size. And that has become sort of what used to be shelf space, when we start looking for, how big is that author's platform. So what we're going to talk about is the fact that if you look at the opportunity to collaborate with target readers, you have the ability to essentially address 6 out of those 8 dials. And it's pretty fascinating, how quickly that, you can do that. I did some of my own research when I came into the industry just to figure this stuff out, and we found some correlations. We're going to rerun some of this research and publish it later this year, and we'll make sure everybody knows about that. But our preliminary research showed that the platform had a significant large effect in terms of correlation with books that earned back their author advance. And that held true even when it was a big platform. So platform, as you mentioned, is absolutely a key driver. However, the thing that I think shocked a lot of my editors when we started showing it was the fact that just asking a consumer about the specific topic and theme of the book, not just as a category, but as the specific book, that had a significant effect as well. And so now that became like an early predictor tool that we could start using. And over time, it did, in fact, increase our success rate, for the books. Again, I don't have that research to publish just yet. We're going to rerun it and make sure we have it available publicly. But that was my experience. And so as Mark was mentioning, the tight acquisition window from receiving the proposal, hopefully maybe getting a chance to talk to the author if you're lucky, that internal discussion, getting the offer together and get that bid out. It could be as tight as 5 days, but it could be a longer period of time. And you certainly do now, in that case, have a lot more opportunity to capture feedback. So what we developed as a brand new solution for the industry, we call it the Target Reader Interest Score. We call it a score because we're going to essentially keep building the intelligence of our database every time we test a book, whether it's been published or if it's a manuscript that somebody wants us to publish. We're getting smarter in our database of what is a good interest score by genre. And so the way this works is that you can find out if there's an actual audience, an interested audience for your potential content. We get that back to you in 3 days. And it's from a reader panel that we have been building. We call it First Look Readers. And they're very engaged. They're very diverse across genres, demographically. And so we will get you a statistically relevant sample of interest and intent to purchase, because you can be interested in something but not necessarily intend to purchase it. And you can see there's different levels based on, excuse me, how much you want to pay. Hear my voice today. What is even more powerful is that we will then also compare your interest score to the comp titles that either you select or we can select for you. And we are building a database of genre benchmarks. I'll show you which ones we have here in a moment. And so now you're looking at, wow, on a macro level within this genre or subgenre, the best-selling books have this interest score, the lower selling books have this. There is a correlation there, as we mentioned. And so we'll talk about that. And then you can also kind of look at the pockets of different readers demographically or other ways to see who's going to be the most compelled by the book. So here's what the report gives you. It basically gives you the book hook rating. We take an initial book hook that you create and you provide, and we compare that against any other comp book hooks that are out there, and you get to see how that score looks like. But then we also ask the readers to stack rank it, right? So they can't cheat. They can't say, I like all of them. Like, all right, which one would you most, purchase? So we provide that. We do the interest and purchase intent by the genre where we have it. Here are the ones we have. We have biographies and autobiographies, self-help. We have a mystery thriller category, history, and business leadership. We're going to have another 10 of these by, looks like about the fall. We're going to fill out some more fiction categories and certainly additional nonfiction as well. So we're really excited about the ability to share with you where does this concept rank in terms of all the other competitors. And then you do get some verbatim comments, which are always interesting. You can't take any individual comment as your guide, but when you start seeing patterns of words and reactions, you can start seeing why they liked it or didn't like it, which is pretty powerful. And then of course you'd like to know, who are these people? So we make sure that you see all the demographics and what genres they are interested in. We will get you the audience that you tell us is the right one for the book. And so, this will basically reflect and confirm that that's who you got. Okay, makes sense? So it's a very simple process. We have an intake form on the website, and it's secure. And so you tell us the basics of the concept. At this point, you obviously probably don't have a manuscript, or if it's fiction, maybe you do, but we're only at this point asking for the descriptive, initial descriptions of the project, and we're going to compare that for you. So we get it out to the first look readers who are qualified as an audience. We get the responses back in about 2 to 3 days. We take a strong look at it, make sure that everything is valid, and then we get it back to you essentially in 3 days. If it's especially hard audience to get, we might need 4, but it's pretty much always 3. So that's simple. It's right on the website and very easy to do and easy to test. You can also test multiple projects. So, if you're looking at a bunch of them for that editorial board window, in the next 2 weeks, you can test multiple projects. So just so you know, this is sort of it fits within a whole set of solutions from the initial journey of a book, which is just the concept, what's the interest score. We then also have a deep dive, which is more qualitative in terms of getting people to actually read the manuscript and then give you very detailed feedback. So that's more qualitative in nature, and that's really powerful for editors and writers and authors to get together on. We have title and cover optimizations, which some people do in-house. Other people run out of capacity and they can't do that enough. So we are able to do those. And then the other product that we're going to talk about in a future webinar is the target reader marketing optimization, where we test, again, your book hook for effectiveness, but then we generate some potential other directions for that book hook, and we crowdsource keywords from the audience and then test those against, the Google database and make sure that are these, keywords that are going to convert for you. So that's a pretty powerful thing we'll get into at another time. But I just wanted to show you that it is part of a family, and this family of solutions does address, pretty much every dial. We can, you can see the author platform. There's a lot of tools that you can analyze that. And then, of course, your publicity and promotion, which the messaging feeds into. So what we are finding is that, yes, acquisition editors and publishers are all about this, but we're starting to get a lot of interest from authors themselves and agents because they want to test whether an author is worth taking on or whether a project is worth pitching. That's been really fascinating. And then book marketers are also engaging quite a bit, particularly on the marketing optimization solution. So I'm going to just stop there and Aaron, see if we have any questions. It's an interesting concept. It was very new, somewhat controversial, when I started doing it in my old job. But I think it's really fascinating. I'd love to hear some questions about how people see this fitting in their process, and of course, Mark as an actual acquisition editor as well.
Yeah, so we do have a few questions. So one, I think it kind of touches on, even like in the Q&A, Mark, you were talking about kind of some of the different social media platforms. So they can really, like, driving sales varies by the outlet and then even like based on the genre. Do you have any insight, probably based on your experience with authors, on, maybe different social platforms that convert, and then even, specific genres that work on specific platforms?
Certainly. Well, look, different types of books perform differently across different platforms, like the question suggests. Since the pandemic, we have found that YouTube and TikTok are the ones that really drive the most sales, more so than Twitter, which used to be a primary driver, and Instagram, which still is a driver, but less so. So if you're like in the lifestyle space, it's Instagram, right? If you're a cookbooks author or a lifestyle author, but if you're a journalist, you want to be more in the Twitter or the YouTube. And then there's this whole book talk trend where, like, that is mostly to promote books more so than to build platform. But we found that it's very effective. And then as kind of an adjunct to that, we have found that podcasts are huge drivers of book sales in a way that I wasn't really able to predict, a few years ago. Authors get on these big podcasts, and next thing you know, like, their sales are spiking like crazy. So it really does depend on what your book is and the kind of writer you are. Obviously, if you're a celebrity, it doesn't really matter which platform it is, because celebrities, publishers aren't really even buying books anymore. They're buying celebrities. You'll be surprised by how many meetings I've taken with well-known authors who have come into the room without really a firm idea of what they want their book to be. And they're still getting 6- and 7-figure deals, which is great when you think about what Jeff's able to offer, because say that celebrity has 3 or 4 ideas. Well, let's test them. Which is the one that's going to work the best? Because the platform is one thing, but you also have to, you got to bring the horse to the water. And that's the idea.
I just to add on to that, I think that's a brilliant concept, because we actually did this a few times. It's very out of the ordinary. But we had an entity who we felt had a lot of potential as an author, platform, presence, ideas, but she did not know what to go out to market with. And so the opportunity to collaborate either as author and agent together, to go sharpen that pitch, or in the case of our situation, we actually invited the author and agent into our publishing team, collaborated, whiteboarded 3 or 4 ideas, tested them, and the one that elevated, is the one that she went out with. So I think that if we sort of change our thinking a little bit on what's possible together to collaborate, I think that's where the power is.
Excellent. This one, I think, Jeff, will be for you. Can a similar target reader interest score be done for a book idea an acquiring editor might be cooking up? I would think that's versus an existing proposal that's coming in.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I was a publisher, we did that. We were kind of, impatient waiting for the kind of books that we were hoping for to get pitched to us. And frankly, we wanted to know, some of the ideas that we had generated internally and that we saw in sort of a macro data mining efforts in terms of, what companies are. I ran a business imprint. And so we mined like, what are the most popular companies? Who are people talking about? But then we wanted to test a specific concept. Do you want to hear this about that company or about the founder? I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to know. And so, yes, we did some proactive testing of concepts before even authors came to us with them.
And then with the survey pool, how do you determine the appropriate pool of people to survey?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, great feedback comes from a great panel that it's not just large, it's also well profiled. And so that's where it's a little different. I've done, all kinds of survey platforms, and the thing that really gets you is the more you layer criteria on who you want, gender, demographics, interest, man, the cost per response just skyrockets and it becomes unwieldy. What we've decided to do is not charge based on criteria, but just simply on the feedback. And so you can give us the specifics of, again, genre interest, demographic details, and we will make sure we can guarantee to find those people in the database prior to you, executing the survey. So it's very important to get the right people, or else the feedback that you get back is really not valid. So that's very important.
So many smaller houses publish in niche genres. What drives sales gets very niche, as well as the data very granular. Do you think your products would help here?
Yeah, I think so, just because of what I just mentioned. I mean, we will be honest if we can't get to the level of responses that if it's a super granular, it's like you want to find some nuclear physicists in Canada or something, we may not be able to get that level. But if it's, within the statistically relevant number of responses, we'll make sure that we tell you, yes, we found them in the database. We do a lot of pre-screening. Even before people join the database, they tell us what they're into, right? They give us really rich data on what they're reading, what, some of those habits are. And so, that's the first wave. And then the second wave is we can ask a lot of pre-qualifying questions in the survey. And, you boot out people that just don't fit. And so, again, we'll make sure that we find the people that you're looking for. And if we can't, we'll be able to very quickly let you know that that's just too granular for us. We haven't been stumped yet, so that's that's a good sign.
Those are the questions. If anyone has anything else that's come to mind, just feel free to throw those into the chat. Otherwise, Jeff, any kind of closing comments on the acquisitions, kind of on the acquisitions topics and data?
No, I think we're good. We really understand this is a new concept for a lot of teams, so we're very interested in working with you to try it. We find that when people try, this, it's a little addictive. Like, you really don't want to go out, particularly with a bigger deal, without having this kind of information in your back pocket. So we'd love to hear from you in doing that. And we do have a special discount to kind of get you started on some trials. We're happy to do that. We collaborate a lot with the Kevin Anderson folks as writers, so I encourage you to contact them as well. But the website has some great information on it, targetaudienceinsights.com. We have a quote calculator. We have an ROI analysis. So if any of this stuff seems interesting to you, we have a lot of tools to help you and maybe your senior executives or, publishers who might be a little skeptical, to help give them the guidance that you need there. So happy to follow up on that. We do have special pricing for freelancers, self-publishers, indie level folks. It does require a little bit of a step down in terms of confidence level because there's a few less responses, but it's still statistically significant at a pretty high level. So, happy to talk through that as well.
Excellent. All right. So for everyone who has registered, you will be getting a follow-up email with, like Jeff said, you'll get a link to a sample report, a special offer to try out some of the services, some additional information on Kevin Anderson and Associates. You'll also be getting a link to a survey if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes just to fill that out, so we can make sure that future webinars are going to be the best that they can be and be exactly what is helpful for our attendees. Jeff, do you have time for one last question that's come in?
Sure.
All right. This sounds like a much needed technology similar to beta testing films. How successful is your insight analysis in predicting successful books so far in comparison to the 80% fail rate of traditional publishing methods?
That is the final level of evidence. I can only hint to you that in my prior publishing career, we found that evidence. I cannot share that because it's proprietary to the prior company, obviously, but we are working on a series of, sort of evidence-based reports that can show you the correlation with real sales lift. Now, I will say the only way to truly do that is like if you looked at your catalog, let's just say you had 20 titles and you took 10 of them, tested them, put them through the process, 10 of them you did not. That's really the only way that you can have absolutely hardcore evidence. We do have a lot of anecdotal evidence from authors and other folks who did their very best book, particularly after the manuscript analysis, that sort of thing. But in terms of the hardcore ROI numbers, that's something we're working on, and we're interested in talking to either an imprint or a smaller publisher, so we can do a partnership to show, as long as you're willing to, sort of produce the, share the results of the study, we would be able to collaborate with you on a pretty cool research project on that. So that's where it stands at the moment. Great.
Well, thank you everybody for jumping in. Keep an eye out for that follow-up email, and if you can fill out the survey. Other than that, have a great rest of the day and check out Target Audience Insights and Kevin Anderson and Associates. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Aaron.